Well, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 4th of June, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to have Tony joining us about economics, but before we get to that, we're going to take a look at some of Trump's architectural aspirations. What does it tell us? You know, we have, actually, there's a term called Trump d'oeil, I guess is how you pronounce it. It's French. I don't know how to speak French. Anyway, the bottom line is it's about a trick of the eye. And we're going to take a look at this. Trump himself said, I might leave up this UFC structure, this circus tent that he's put on the White House lawn. He said, I might leave that up permanently. They did that with the Eiffel Tower. Well, let's compare what's going on with the Arc de Triomphe in France and Paris versus the Arch of Trump that is happening there. But we also saw yesterday, we're going to talk about this, the GOP rushed to embrace Pride Month. Yeah, people like Mike Johnson and Ted Cruz, these guys who have been selling us a false theology behind Zionism, are now finding another false theology to get behind. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, I want to begin with this so-called phone call between Trump and Netanyahu. Folks, I think this is perfectly fake, absolutely fake. First of all, the way it was sold by the media, they just repeated the term steamrolled, steamrolled, steamrolled over and over again. Everybody knows that Trump is a puppet of Netanyahu. Everybody knows that he has been bought and sold like one of Epstein's prostitutes. And yet, even as we had a follow-up to it yesterday, you had people who talked both to Trump and to Netanyahu. Neither of them really pushed back on this. They didn't say, well, we're going to get those people who are leaking this stuff, right? Usually Trump is furious when anything leaks, but he knows that this is to his disadvantage. As a matter of fact, like I said, I think he planted this stuff. And, when you look at this guy, both of these guys have got, this supposed fight was over Lebanon. But, both of these guys have got a long list of people they would like to kill, places to go, people to kill, lands to steal. Whether you're talking about Trump wants to go to Cuba, then maybe Greenland, who knows? You've got, of course, Netanyahu, this Greater Israel Project, who wants to go to Lebanon. He wants to go to Syria, eventually to Turkey, all these different places. Well, this is what this is looking like when we look at Lebanon. Here's a good example here. See all the people in this picture? Israel killed every single child in this photograph in South Lebanon in less than 30 days. And let's just put a face on it because, we can talk about groups of people. We can talk about numbers. Those are just statistics. Well, here's an individual story. This is a father and son who used to like to go out and walk and observe birds. And so here they are just walking down the street, blown up, right? One person after the other. This is what Israel is doing. Targeting civilians. That's a father and son right there, okay? Israel killed this Lebanese father and his son walking home in South Lebanon. That's what they look like. There's the face of the people that they killed. This is what it looks like when you target civilians. Like I showed you that video. You just got one guy walking down the road by himself, boom, he's blown up. Another guy, same thing. What's the military objective to this? You know, this is not only morally evil, it's also a failed military tactic as well. As a matter of fact, Robert Pape has talked quite a bit about this. He teaches at the University of Chicago. He was not a military tactician, but he was, I guess, really more of a historian, economics guy. And he started looking at the wars that we continue to lose after World War II. And he said, you know, they constantly justify this by talking about how many bombs they have dropped, how much destruction they have created in a country. Well, that was an absolute failure in Korea. I mean, the number of bombs that we dropped there is just astounding. And we literally did turn that country into rubble. And of course, the communists did not rebuild it either. But it did not result in a win. And all these the body counts and the bomb counts and everything that we saw from Vietnam did not result in a win. It's just a useless metric. You have Colonel McGregor has talked about that as well. We're seeing the same thing now from the Hegseth Pentagon. They're focusing on that as well. But it also gets to the point where you've got, this is a picture that was snapped. This is a bomb heading down to a Christian area, right over a church that is there. They're destroying the civilian infrastructure. This is the targeting of cities, the targeting of people. That always fails. And that's what Robert Pape has talked about. He said, when you do that, that galvanizes public opinion against you, the outsider who's doing this. Even in Iran, they wanted regime change. Well, the people there wanted regime change as well, until we started bombing them. Then they got behind the guy that they opposed because he was the lesser of two evils. And as a matter of fact, they got out after Trump was talking about how he's going to destroy their civilization, how he was going to destroy their infrastructure. You had civilians circle around the important infrastructure areas there. They weren't forced to do that by their government. This was not Saddam Hussein using hostages and putting families and children in areas to keep them from being bombed. These are people who are saying, well, the world is going to see you dropping a bomb on us. The world is going to see what this looks like. And the world needs to see what Israel is doing to these people in Lebanon. It is absolutely criminal. And so with all this, we're supposed to believe that these two guys, that Trump really got angry about this. And not about the killing of civilians, but just about the fact that they are continuing to encroach into Lebanon to take it over. And so supposedly there was this Trump call. I think it went more like this AI parody.
What the are you doing? You're crazy, Daddy. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. You're so bad. Oh, stop. Everybody hates you now. Everybody hates Israel because of this. Not me, though. What am I wearing? The usual. Until I have to shower.
And of course, he's got a gold pager in his hand. I wonder what that's about. Be careful about gifts, Greeks bearing gifts or Israelis bearing pagers, right? So, when we look at this, I don't buy any of this. You got a couple of different sources, supposedly to Axios. And then you got Trump himself trying to sell this. Oh, yeah, I really put that guy in his place. I really steamrolled him. That's the sources were telling Axios. They reported that over and over and over again. No, I don't think that is really the case. As a matter of fact, it was Marty who we were talking about Trump, or Trump was actually saying, I think I look like Elvis. As a matter of fact, I don't need any of those acts that have canceled on my event here. I'll do it myself. I get bigger crowds than Elvis did at his peak anyway. So, so a lot of people say, well, is he going to sing? No, he's just going to stand up there and drone on endlessly. And so Marty, if I'm Marty, put up a meme and I've seen it all over Twitter, and reposted it myself, I think. And it was Trump in a fat Elvis suit, because again, he put up a picture of himself. He said, a lot of people say I look like Elvis, right? And so on one side of the photo, it's Trump. On the other side of the photo, it's Elvis. He draws right down the half, and it's like, well, I don't know. I don't see the resemblance. But he put him in a fat Elvis suit standing in front of the Strait of Hormuz. And I said, yeah. And he put the caption, "Caught in a Trap." I said, that's absolutely perfect. You go back and you look at the suspicious minds. These guys are suspicious, aren't they? I'm caught in a trap. I can't walk out because I love you too much, Bibi. Why can't you see what you're doing to me? When they don't believe a word that I'm saying. That's really what should have been in the phone call, shouldn't it?
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk around because I love you too much, babe. Why can't you see what you're doing to me when you don't believe a word I'm saying? We can't go on together with suspicious minds.
Yeah, well, it's just a lover's quarrel, isn't it? But, he says, I'm keeping you out of prison. Both of these guys need to go to prison. As a matter of fact, it was Trump himself many times said before he became president, he said these guys who got us into these Middle East wars for Israel need to be impeached.
Nancy Pelosi, the speaker.
Well, when she first got in and was named speaker, I met her, and I'm very impressed by her. I think she's a very impressive person. I like her a lot.
Yeah, you became like her, insider trader.
I'm surprised that she didn't do more in terms of Bush and going after Bush. It just seemed like she was going to really look to impeach Bush and get him out of office, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing.
Impeaching him?
Absolutely, for the war. For the war.
Because of the conduct of the war.
Well, he lied.
For what he's doing now.
Got us into the war with lies.
Yeah.
And
who else did that?
Look at the trouble Bill Clinton got into with something that was totally unimportant, and they tried to impeach him, which was nonsense. And yet Bush,
compared to what I did,
this horrible war with lies, by lying, by saying they had weapons of mass destruction, by saying all sorts of things that turned out not to be true.
Yeah, well, let's just clear the record here. What Bill Clinton should have been impeached for was what he was accused for, and that was sexual assault and rape, as well as corruption, insider trading and dealing. And of course, Trump has become all of these things on steroids. The reason that those charges were not brought was because Ken Starr was a sellout. Ken Starr later became the defense attorney for Jeffrey Epstein. It's such a cesspool. It's not a swamp, folks. It's a cesspool. It's where we send our excrement, our politicians. Unfortunately, there's no treatment center there. They just fester and rot, and it's a stench heard to have a smell to heaven. But of course, Trump has not just said that one interview. He mentioned this many times. 2011, he said, in order to get elected, Barack Obama will start a war with Iran. 2012, he tweeted out, Obama will attack Iran in order to get reelected. He said that a couple of months later. And then he said, I predict Obama will at some point attack Iran in order to save face. That was in 2013. He's still saying it. Then he said in November 2013, he said, remember I predicted a long time ago that Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly? He's not skilled. Not skilled.
He's projecting.
Well, yeah, exactly. You talk about the ultimate projection. This guy ought to be projected right into prison. He and Netanyahu as well. Both of them are corrupt. Both of them are domestic criminals. Both of them are mass murderers and war criminals. They both belong in prison. And so the reality is steamrolled. Yeah, Bibi said, okay, just make sure everything is taken care of. Yeah, that's right. Well, it is the Israelis who are ordering sanctions and all the rest of this. So reportedly, Trump ripped Netanyahu. That is the Zero Hedge headline. And yet yesterday, what we saw was the fact that these guys are getting together, and it really is kind of a professional wrestling thing. CNBC anchor just straight up asked Bibi about the Trump call, the bonkers Trump call. He said, "You're effing crazy." And again, that was just a leak, I believe. And so she said, let's talk about, this is Sarah Eisen. Let's talk about the call you had with him this week, which is getting a lot of attention. Everybody's talking about that, right? Just as Trump intended. He confirmed that, he said, can you confirm that he said that you were effing crazy? How did you react to that? What really happened in that call? And he says, well, I'm not going to get into the details of our conversation, said Netanyahu. We've had thousands, well, lots of them. And if you think this is a crisis, you should be in on some of the other conversations. Again, they're just a happy couple. And as we pointed out this week, they're moving from engagement and entanglement to an actual marriage. They're going to marry the Department of Defense here in America with Israeli Defense Force. They're going to merge the two with the next NDAA. So it will be a marriage. It's been a very long engagement. And even the people with suspicious minds should be suspicious about this, especially people with suspicious minds. And so he said, we want to make sure that Iran doesn't pose a threat to Israel or to America. And this is what they've been telling us, to lie us into one futile war that we've lost after another in the Middle East, that, these people that we don't like, these people whose land we want, we say they're a threat to us. Well, they probably are because you've been attacking them. But they're a threat to you too. So you need to take them out. He said, we set out to expand the circle of peace, said Netanyahu. Really? That's so phony the way the two of them talk about peace.
They went
with
to
the
war
Abraham
to
Accord.
Expand the circle of peace, the places that aren't at war.
That's right. It's very peaceful when you drop a bomb. It creates this circle of nothingness that's there, isn't it? So he said, we want to expand the Abraham Accords. Well, I just got to say what Jesus said about that. The Jews said, Abraham is our father. Jesus said, your father is the devil. He said, Abraham saw my day and he was glad of it. But Abraham and Sarah had a promise from God, didn't they? And what happened with that? I've mentioned this before, what the Zionists get wrong about all this. What was one of the big problems in Abraham's life? It was when he had a certain promise from God that he's going to have descendants. God said, I'm going to make a mighty nation out of you. And he decided that God wasn't doing it quickly enough, not doing it in the way that he thought it should happen, just like the Zionists. And so he took matters into his own hands, so to speak, he and his wife, and had an illegitimate child with a slave, Hagar. Then Sarah kicked her out. What did God do? God defended Hagar. And there's a lesson in that, I think, for all of us, many lessons in all of that. God himself will provide a sacrifice. You don't have to kill your son. I wanted to see if you would trust me, if you would do things the way that, I think Abraham learned his lesson from that first situation with Ishmael. And then when it came to Isaac, it's like, all right, God, I'll trust you. And he decided that even if he killed his son, because God told him to do it, and he had a direct word from God, that God would bring his son back from the dead. But God brought his own son back from the dead, the one that is rejected by the Zionists, both so-called Christian Zionists as well as the Hebrew Zionists, because they replace God and Christ with Israel worship. Just listen to Huckabee.
I want you to know I'm not a Zionist because I'm Jewish. I'm a Zionist, and an unapologetic one, because I believe the Bible.
You don't trust God to fulfill his own promises, and you don't realize that God already fulfilled his promise to them.
That Jews around the world, representing only 0.2% of the world's population, have created outsized impact on the world.
Well, when you start to cut corners and when you start to throw out morality, that kind of gets you there faster, doesn't it? Why do the wicked prosper? That is always the age-old question that was asked by David and by his son. Why do the wicked prosper? It doesn't mean that they have God's imprimatur on them. No, it means usually that they've cut corners. as they say, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it certainly seems to look that way. Behind every billionaire is a huge crime, right? And so did he say that you'll be in jail if not for me? They asked Benjamin Netanyahu, and he says, well, I'm not going to get into the details. He's been very vocal about the absurdity of this false trial that I'm going through. Look, these guys are birds of a feather. They should both be jailbirds, as a matter of fact. So the question is, will they ever face justice? Yes, they will, because we know that God is the one who will bring justice there. Well, let's go to the other ego aspect of Trump, and that is his architecture that's there. He thinks that this WFC arena that he's put should stay on the White House grounds. And, I think there's a certain justification for that. Because what we have with Trump is really a WWE professional wrestling fraud that he has been running for the longest time. But he compares it to the Eiffel Tower. He said, they put up the Eiffel Tower. It's just for an event, temporary structure. But they decided that they would keep it up because it was quite attractive to a lot of people. So maybe we'll just never take down this UFC arena thing that is there. It was put up in 1889 as part of the World's Fair. They have a tendency to leave these World's Fair things up. I think the globe that they built for the New York City World's Fair in 1964, I think, is still up. They left up the tower in Knoxville here. They left up the Space Needle in Seattle. So a lot of these things stay up for the longest time. But Trump is not creating a World's Fair at all. He said, we're building something in front of the White House that is quite attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, looks like a carnival. And so, it is a monument to this carnival barker. It's more of a monument than the other arch that he's talking about putting up, which we're going to talk about here in a second. So he said, they kept it up after, they were going to take it down, but they kept it up after 1909. According to the Eiffel Tower website, the architect, Gustav Eiffel, was lobbying for that. Well, this is kind of interesting because Steve Watson, Paul Watson's brother, who is a real Trump sycophant, he's out there cheering Trump's arch that is out there, comparing it to Barack Obama's arch. As a matter of fact, there's somebody else who did the comparison. He wrote a whole article on it. They just put up a picture of the two and said, look at these two. And of course, everything about Obama's monument to himself is disgusting and ugly and eyesore. It's not an eyeful, it's an eyesore, but it is. You look at the building itself, and he's got this weird arch that looks like a piece of garbage out in front of it. And Steve Watson just waxes on and on about what a beautiful piece of classical architecture Trump's arch of 250 feet high. And if you put it side by side with the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, they're actually the same size. They look pretty much exactly the same. It's like he copied it. He got up to 250 feet because he put that gigantic winged golden statue on there to get the extra height. But when I look at this, what I see is not beautiful classical architecture. I see a kind of Hitlerian architecture. And let me explain that. When you ask what are the characteristics of Hitler's architecture, this is the way one person described it. Grandiose, neoclassical, explicitly intended as tools of propaganda and intimidation, as well as with ego. When you look at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, that was put up by Bonaparte to flatter himself. Kind of like Trump as well. We got these wonderful people who put these things up, like Hitler and Bonaparte. They have a commonality, don't they? They invade other countries without provocation. They are the aggressors, the invaders. And so Watson contrasts the Arc de Triomphe to actually the Arch of Trump. That's what we ought to say. Contrast that to Obama's brutalist style of architecture. Now, who is it that's famous for the brutalist style of architecture? Well, that's kind of a Stalinist, communist architecture. So what we have here is a juxtaposition of, on the one hand, you have a kind of Hitler and his grandiose neoclassical tool of propaganda and intimidation. And on the other hand, you have the communist, Marxist, Stalinist, brutalist form of architecture, which is represented by Obama. Isn't that interesting? The architecture, like so many other things, is downstream from what we think and how we view the world, isn't it? As I've said, religion is at the top, politics, culture, and even architecture are further down. They flow down from these people's perspectives. And I think we can really see what is happening with this architecture. So on the one hand, we have the Stalinist inspired Marxist Obama who does his brutalist architecture. On the other hand, we have the guy who loves the fascism, the propaganda and intimidation of Hitler in terms of his architecture. So as Steve Watson waxes eloquently about how much he loves this, he said it is towering marble, golden eagles, inscriptions evoking one nation under God. And then on the other hand, you have a bent, leaning metal structure that looks like a giant wire hanger or a failed piece of ironwork. One of them lifts the spirit, the other one drains it. And yet they are both doing the same type of thing that dictators like Bonaparte have always done, honoring and boasting about themselves. These side-by-side images, yes.
It only looks good because he's putting it right next to the Obama thing. I didn't think that we really needed yet another monument to the dying empire in D.C. I didn't feel like we needed to spend our tax money on any of these, regardless of how it looks.
That's right. And I've said that before. I said, of course, Lance was with me. We would go up to D.C. and I'd say, this place is like a mausoleum. It's all these monuments to a dead civilization that was based on individual liberty and limited government. And it has absolutely nothing to do with what America is today. And so he goes on, he says, Obama's thing has been described as a Tower of Doom. Yeah, it is very much looks like that, this brutalist architecture. The physical embodiment of a worldview that treats traditional beauty as suspect and replaces it with abstract statements about power and disruption. That's why the Stalinists and the Marxists liked it. That's why Obama likes it. And of course, then you have the more Hitlerian version of this that he copied from Bonaparte, who built that after his very first victory. He came back and he built an arch. And so, again, without that gold statue at the top, a golden figure symbolizing victory, without that, it'd be the same size as the one in Paris, that it looks very, very much like. The project sits alongside another classically inspired initiative, a grand new ballroom at the White House that restores elegance and scale to the president's house, says Steve Watson. Let me pause here to vomit. I just can't stand this sycophancy. It is an eyesore. It costs a fortune. It has absolutely nothing to do with elegance or balance. It has everything to do with protecting his sorry behind from the people who want to kill him because of all of his policies. They understand that America has become a stench to the world, and he has become the target of everyone in the world that has suffered at the hands of his policies. So he's got to build a bunker for himself. That's all it is. He can gild it as much as he wants, but it's nothing but a disgusting bunker that he has there. And so Watson goes on, he says, just in over a year, the Capitol has been transformed from a city plagued by graffiti and encampments into a place where historic monuments gleam again and water flows freely in the fountains. Well, let's talk a little bit about this reflecting pond that is there. Why did they call it a reflecting pond? And what is the difference between a reflecting pond and a swimming pool? You see, Trump loves the idea, look, I'm making this bright blue swimming pool that is out here. And except that is not what you want with a reflecting pond. They were very deliberate in what they did. With a reflecting pond, you want the base to be dark because you want the water to reflect what is around it or above it or whatever, which is the purpose of it. That's what's in the name. It's a reflecting pond. When you make the bottom of the pond bright, as Trump has done, then what you get is this confusion of images. You get some reflections, but you also see mainly the bottom of the thing. And so just like the Constitution, Trump needs to go back and say, what was the purpose of the reflecting pond? but he doesn't do that. As a matter of fact, you want to talk about how he has removed the graffiti off of monuments in Washington, D.C.? Well, that's fine. The problem is that his executive orders are like graffiti over the Constitution. All these people who think that Trump is a blue-collar billionaire, no, it's just that his tastes run to McDonald's Happy Meals. He just has this pedestrian, ignorant taste and things he looks at. And when you look at the reflecting pond, I don't know if you'll be able, if this narcissist, that's the irony of it, this narcissist probably won't be able to see his reflection in the pond because he's painted the bottom of it so bright blue. You know, that was a purpose that he didn't understand, just like he didn't understand the purposes of the Constitution, rejected them, put graffiti all over them, and made it back into his, into a reflection of his own narcissism, ego, and tyranny. So, but Watson likes it. You know, Watson and other Trump cheerleaders just don't get the idea of what a reflecting pond is about. Now, the reflecting pool has received a proper deep cleaning and a mirror finish, not a superficial coat of paint. Yeah. Well, you know, he goes on to brag about the fact that it's going to save a lot of money in terms of water, because if you make something dark, it's going to get heated up. You're going to have evaporation losses and everything. But that's the purpose of a reflecting pond. So, you know, whatever. I think the bottom line is, though, that he doesn't really understand the purpose of a reflecting pool. And he doesn't understand the purpose of the Constitution either. Trump's true legacy is one of not getting rid of the decay in Washington. His true legacy is bringing moral decay and corruption like we have never seen in Washington before. You can clean up, you can kick out the homeless people, you can pressure wash the graffiti off of the monuments, but the stench in Washington is Trump and his ilk. These invaders, these aggressors who start wars, who reduce the buildings in other countries to rubble. They are building their gilded monuments to their egos, just like Napoleon and these other invaders and tyrants have done in the past. Because, you know, there's really nothing new under the sun. Yeah, you want to talk about cleaning up the graffiti? How about all these executive orders that are graffiti on the Constitution? Yeah, by all means, let's leave up his UFC circus tent. It is a monument to all of his fake AI memes. It's a monument to his WWE professional wrestling phony assassination attempts and his phony disputes with the WWE owner. You know, you remember the video where, and I don't have it here in the deck, but there's a video where Trump is always hanging around with the WWE and doing things with him. And they had one set piece that they had put up where these guys get Vince McMahon and they set him in a chair and Trump comes out and shaves his head. And Vince McMahon is sitting there, like, oh, you know, like he's not, oh, I can't believe you're doing this, but he's just letting him do it, right? That's exactly what is happening with Trump and Netanyahu. It is so incredibly phony. And we're supposed to believe that Trump just shaved the head of Benjamin Netanyahu last week. So, yes, by all means, leave up your UFC memorial. It is the perfect memorial for you. There don't need to be any golden statues, any more golden statues of Trump. His monument is a circus tent. We're going to take a break, but before we do, we're going to have Tony join us. Before we do, Stealth Patriot, thank you for the tip. He says, McMinnville, Tennessee, in Warren County, passed a moratorium on data centers being brought to the city. It's going to be interesting to see if the federal government pursues a lawsuit. Yeah, it will be. And I think, look, I said before, we're not going to be able to stop AI with prohibitions because the government wants it too much. But again, I think that what is happening with these things, people ought to protest what is being done to our electric bills and what is being done to our water supply and all the rest of this stuff. It truly is a trespass, and it truly is a kind of eminent domain for the benefit of a private corporation and for the government's purpose, which is not about building a highway or an interstate system. The government is taking property and pushing this in many cases because they want to have a tool of surveillance and control on us. Totally the opposite of something like an interstate or a road. Hedge 88 says, I'm convinced that war is just an excuse to demolish all the beautiful ancient World Fair buildings. Could be. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And Tony Arterburn with Wise Wolf Gold is going to be joining us.
The seed in our homeland, boys, let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys, call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.
Liberty. It's your move. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Tell Alexa to add the APS radio skill and have access to the best channels anywhere. From country to blues, classic hits to news, APS Radio curates incredibly diverse playlists for you to enjoy. Get details at apsradio.com.
Well, joining us now is Tony Arterburn of Wise Wolf Gold. And again, as I said yesterday, you saw all this stuff from the European Central Bank, as well as many mainstream news articles. It was on Drudge for a couple of days at the top, talking about the fact that now gold has surpassed the holdings of U.S. Treasury bills because people don't trust the American government for some reason. I don't know why. It seems perfectly trustworthy to me, don't you think? But I said, Tony told us about this weeks and weeks ago. So, we look at the slogan, tomorrow's news today. I think Tony's got this weeks or months in advance. And it's a good thing that he does, because I think as volatile as the markets have been, if you didn't have some sense of the long-term direction things are going, Tony, you'd be out of business by now. So it's absolutely an essential skill to survival in this kind of marketplace. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, always great to be with you, David. And I appreciate, I was listening to the show yesterday and putting those things together. I mean, when the media, the mainstream, whenever they put out a headline like that, it doesn't really confirm it for me, but I do feel crazy sometimes.
Yeah.
When I'm like way out in front, like, hey, are you watching this metric? It's interesting because the European Central Bank put out that press release that gold has overtaken U.S. Treasuries as the number one held reserve asset. We've known that for a while, but if you scroll back further into the press releases from the European Central Bank, it's not, I think it was just about a year ago, they put out that gold was actually disrupting the monetary system, that it's destructive. Gold itself was destructive to the system. So now a lot of things have changed, right? The fact that gold is supplanting the dollar and becoming the world's reserve currency de facto again. Mm-hmm. A lot of the sentiment is changing. You can see that in the headlines.
Yeah. Well, it was also yesterday I talked about Jeffrey Tucker's article at Brownstone, where he said, we have been lied to over and over again. We all know the government lies with its inflation figures. It lies with its unemployment figures. Whenever it puts out a metric, it is always a lie. And he went into detail about how many different ways they have lied to us and how frequently they have changed the way they calculate inflation. They have changed it 8 times in 32 years or something like that, or 35 years, I think. But it's about once every 4 years, they completely change the way they calculate inflation. And that's the way Kevin Warsh is going to come in, the new Fed chair. He wants to come in start out by changing the way inflation is calculated. Yet another one of these quote unquote adjustments. But he went back to a project that a guy is working on. The guy's name is Elliot, and he used artificial intelligence to go back and put these numbers together, because that's one of the things that AI is already very, very good at, and that is making sense out of a haystack of information and finding the needles that are in there. And when they looked at this and saw the actual inflation rate was quite a bit higher, and noticed that we've been in recession now since basically the COVID nonsense. The economy has declined. The purchasing power has declined. I think the number was something like, let's see, I've got the actual percentage here, but I have to take a look at it. And but it is a tremendous decline in purchasing power since COVID. I mean, it's been like what we all suffered through at the end of the 1970s that was kicked off by the OPEC oil embargo. And now we got a Trump oil embargo that's going to kick this off. So I think inflation is really going to start raging on us.
Yeah, and the premise of that too, I've always wondered why they don't truly calculate the impact of currency creation in the inflation numbers.
That's right.
Because you're not dealing with a static purchasing power. It is transitory.
Mm-hmm.
Not that inflation is transitory, but the purchasing power is transitory and arcing downward, so over time. I've always wondered, and I think that, again, the article is correct, because the true price of inflation is the expansion of the money supply. And then you go back to 1980, where we had, the peak inflation from, the runaway inflation 1970s and OPEC and all the rest of that. And you had Paul Volcker come in to contract the money supply. If you go back to that and you look at the purchasing power of the dollar, then we have 56 times more currency on earth today than in 1980. So if you expanded the money supply, not just in the United States, but globally, and destroyed purchasing power. So the true metrics are much worse than the figures that the government puts out, because they're assuming static purchasing power.
Yeah, that is amazing. And they never look at the quantitative easing or any of that kind of stuff. They don't really factor that in. They only look at interest rates, don't they? That's such a tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
It's only a portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to think that the Trump $250 bill is like an end run around, quantitative easing by some sort of like paper fiat, decree that we're going to put out all these $250 bills to make it look, somewhat stable out there, and start giving people $250 bills. That'll last for a while.
Yeah.
But currency.
Well, you're going to need that to fill up your gas tank, right? Let me pull out one of these Trump notes to fill up my gas tank now. $250 to fill it up. I think it's going to be what the $100 bill was worth when he came in. That's going to be the purchasing power of his $250 bill when he leaves, I think.
Well, it's funny. History. I was listening to a history of money yesterday on my drive back. I went down to Texas. I'm back up in Branson today because I had to pick up some silver to take to the trading floor. But I was listening to a book on the history of money, and one of the key points in Roman history, the first emperor to debase currency was Nero. And if you remember, you go back to the COVID era, there was that famous post of Trump with a violin, or something like you can't stop what's coming, Nero fiddled, Rome burned. But it was Nero who first debased the currency. And what's interesting is he had his face on it. He put his face on currency. So maybe a little bit of history rhyming sometimes with great empires and debasement of currencies right now.
Well, it always is a hallmark of a tyrant that they want to build monuments to themselves, put their faces on the money, and name everything after themselves. And Trump is just checking all the boxes, isn't he? Well, since his lockdowns, there's been a 12%, I finally found it here, 12% GDP loss. Half of the U.S. dollar purchasing power has been stolen by Trump since his last regime. And of course, Biden helped him as well. It's not just Trump fiddling around. Trump does fiddle with the tariff rates and the taxes and things like that, and it hasn't been to our benefit. But 12% loss of GDP, and half of the purchasing power of the dollar has disappeared because the economic shenanigans attached to the lockdowns alone. And the lockdowns were done by Trump. Everybody wants to say, well, okay, it's not the lockdowns are not the problem, and it's not the vaccine is the problem. It's the mandate from Biden that's the problem. No, Biden had a role to play in it, and they needed to shift it off to him so they could keep this ball rolling. If they had everything done by one guy, I think even the MAGA people would catch on eventually.
It's a tag team sport.
Yeah.
You and I were talking in 2019, and we've referenced this many times, but that last quarter when the central banks around the world, not just the Federal Reserve, but they were propping up the repo markets, and then the United States Central Bank, was it like 6 trillion, Dave? I mean, it was some massive amount of liquidity injection.
It was astronomical. I remember looking at it. It's like, what is a repo market? Are they taking people's cars? What's the deal with this? And I looked at the amount of money that they were doing, and when I first looked at it, it was the entire GDP essentially of Puerto Rico. And then a couple of weeks go by, and they do another one that's even bigger. I looked that up, and that was equivalent to the entire GDP of Switzerland, which is like the 20th largest economy in the world. And they're dumping that kind of printing, essentially, into the economy. And that was just before they started all the lockdown stuff.
There was a leap that happened on the timeline, and I go back and look at this. It's interesting metrics, but we talk about this. If people try to compare now to the 70s, and I guess you can in some ways with runaway inflation and what happened after we went off the gold standard. But much of what Paul Volcker did worked. I mean, it was manageable, even with the numbers that we had and the debt that we had then. And you have to look at the structure that the world economy was in, and a lot of the things that the United States still made at the time, and the economic power that we still had at the time. So there was, for many years, a couple of decades, where nothing really happened. We were able to have, it's seemingly, Wall Street did well, and stocks did well, and all, and the currency was somewhat static. I mean, the purchasing power in the 1980s and the 1990s did not degrade like it is now.
That's right.
When we reached 2008, 2009, David, if you go back and look at the metrics, there's something interesting that happened today. There was an article that even with all of the risk asset sell-offs that happened after the Iran war kicked off, where countries were liquidating gold, if you go look at the metrics, central banks bought 17 tons net of gold in April. So even with all of the sell-off, what happened, if you go back to 08, 09, the buying of central bank gold by central banks, right, was almost zero. So they still use the dollar, like even up to 2008, 2009. It's been since then, and then accelerated since 2022. So even in an environment where risk assets are being liquidated to cover shortfalls, like I think it was like 12 billion in gold that India just liquidated. They're denying it, at least officially, but it looks like about 12 billion of gold was liquidated by the Indian central bank. There's a lot of volatility out there, but still net buying by central banks around the world. That is something different. So this environment is completely different than anything that we've seen before in recent memory. And nothing has actually ever happened before, because we've never been in a fiat around the world, fiat interlinking system with the dollar de-dollarizing like this. So this has never happened. But it's funny, we talk about the European Central Bank, and like they're way behind. I mean, their press release, the dollar is been overtaken, Treasury's overtaken by gold. But if you look, like the infrastructure that I've talked about, which I think will be the next shoe to drop, the infrastructure being built around the world to house physical gold contracts. Hong Kong, and I just got another headline a few days ago. Hong Kong is rapidly building gold storage facility infrastructure for trading. So that's how currency and that's how deals will be done in the future, and it won't be because of the lack of trust and the lack of transparency, the sanctions that have, and weaponization of the dollar that have gone on, rapidly moving away from the dollar. This has to be, when people like Scott Bessent, are talking about sanctioning people, basically becoming a wing of foreign policy, is what I talked about on my show last week. I've never seen that. That's never happened in U.S. history with the sitting U.S. Treasury Secretary. Maybe Morgenthau. I think Don Jeffries brought it up to me from World War II. Maybe Morgenthau, maybe, but because he had the Morgenthau plan for post-World War II Germany. But that's the only time I've ever seen that before. And so I think we're in unprecedented waters where the dollar is clearly in trouble. Each day that clicks by, and we still haven't seen the true fallout has not happened yet because of the release of oil from the strategic reserve, David. You know this.
That's right. And they're running out of that oil because they're drawing it down so quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because, everybody is running out of oil, even the United States, in terms of the strategic petroleum reserve that they're using to try to keep that from blowing up. But, we began this whole thing when Biden started weaponizing the financial system against Russia. And we've seen that happening over and over again. And yet you talked about Bessent, and we look at what is happening in terms of Trump's pick for DNI. He's got this guy, Bill Pulte, who basically was weaponization on steroids. We're going to see domestic weaponization. We're going to see all this social credit stuff and all the rest of this stuff. They're laying the foundation for all of this. And they're out there saying, we're going to start using the intelligence agencies to identify groups who are anti-American and this and that, who are racist. And you know where they're going to go with this. We know where the Democrats are going to go with it once they take power, and we know where the Republicans are going to go with this. They're going to go into anti-Semitism. Don't you dare criticize Israel, or we will call you a racist, and we will punish and cancel you. And so this is what the future looks like. This is one of the other reasons I said about gold. It's not merely, for me, a play on inflation and bad monetary policy and the decline of the fiat currency. For me, it is survival in a world where I'm going to be a target. And you will too, depending on your political and religious beliefs. You need to have something that's going to be outside of their system where they're going to do their best to shut you down. And I think we're going to see, they want to talk about weaponization and all the rest of this stuff, but they're going to do this, the same type of stuff that they've been doing, which has undermined the U.S. dollar and financial system internationally. They're going to use that same kind of weapon against us domestically, just like Madison said. The tools of war abroad become instruments of tyranny at home. And that financial weaponization is going to become a tool of tyranny. We've already seen a lot of it happening already.
And Madison also said that a republic cannot survive in a state of perpetual warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And we're clearly seeing the end of that experiment. And who knew a guy that built crappy homes would make America a bad place to live in?
That's right.
Who knew?
And we're not talking about Madison. He didn't build crappy homes, but Pulte does.
We're talking about Pulte. And even, becoming director of national intelligence. I mean, the job doesn't really attract the best people, I guess, over time. And it is sad to watch, David, but you're right. I think we just have to be prepared for how ugly the partisanship's going to get, the tyranny from whatever side takes charge. I mean, whether it's the Democrats in 28 or whether it's another, Republican or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. The tyranny is baked into this system. They're building the AI data centers for this very goal of monitoring speech, monitoring movement. That's what they would like to build. It doesn't matter what side they're supposedly on. The left-right paradigm is garbage. There's no truth in that. It's all a race to the Great Reset and the agendas that the parasite class have for us. Everything that they've talked about for decades is culminating here. At least that's the push, is to get you into this surveillance system under their thumb and bypass the Constitution.
I agree.
So it is our responsibility at this point to start thinking, how do we stay outside of the system to the best of our ability?
Yeah. And the thing that I'm surprised at, Tony, is the fact that people have picked up on Bill Pulte. A lot of people called him a thug and things like that. And they mentioned the fact that he was, Trump's, I guess, bloodhound to go find dirt on his political enemies and everything. But think what it really tells us about Trump, that he's going to link this with intelligence, right? Pulte is a guy whose family, as you point out, was a mass producer of homes, predominantly, I guess, in Texas. I don't know. That's where I saw him. I didn't see him so much in other places where I've lived, but a big home builder. And he's in charge of housing and development and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and things like that. So how does a guy like that get picked to do intelligence? Well, just look at what he did for Trump. He used artificial intelligence to ferret out information on Trump's enemies and to go down into the fine print and find a place where they could come after them for what was essentially a process crime. And why does Trump hate these? Well, certainly, there's justification for Letitia James. I mean, she is as corrupt as they come in terms of an attorney general in New York. But and she came after him for all kinds of frivolous stuff. Lisa Cook, on the other hand, what is her issue? She just opposed his push to lower interest rates. That's the basis for why he came after her. And so he uses this guy, Bill Pulte, who gets this stuff and finds this dirt and gives it to them so they can come after people. Trump loves that so much. This little loyal Stalin-esque guy, bring me the man, I'll find the crime type of thing. He loved that so much that he puts him in charge as director of national intelligence. And that right there screams of what Trump wants to do domestically in terms of coming after even policy enemies of his. And I just don't understand why people aren't screaming more about this, because to me, when I saw that, it's like, whoa, that's about the biggest admission of where he wants to take the spying on Americans right there, and using artificial intelligence to do it.
Well, it may be unfair to P.T. Barnum, but I guess we're going to find out what happens when you give P.T. Barnum executive power and nuclear weapons. But we're building, and I would hope if we're building the carnival on the White House lawn, that maybe they'll do the carnival model and move on after a certain time. People realize they're being fleeced. No, you're right, David. I mean, these things, and it's hard to watch on the outside because so much of even alternative media is still soaked in the left-right paradigm of us versus them, or my team versus your team. We have to remember that the goal of all of this is Agenda 2030. It's the Great Reset. And, it's funny, kind of like the carnival model or the casino model. You were talking about inflation and other numbers. So much of the financial system, and this is just my research and everything I've been looking at for years, is so fake. It's absolutely fake. It's built on nothing. It's built on hundreds of times earnings. Unsustainable numbers. Like, these things aren't real. It's just not real. So you're looking at the distraction, whether you're watching, MSNBC or Jim Cramer comes on, you're talking about stocks and all these things that don't really even matter anymore. Literally, they're building their surveillance state. The United States, there's a controlled demolition of our standing in the world, of our empire, of our currency. It's clearly going on. My friend Charlie Robinson wrote that book, The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. A lot of this stuff is predicted in that 2021 book. And so we're watching this in real time. So the key here is not to get distracted so much by because there's so much information, but what information actually matters. And so that's why when you pick up on an article, that something I talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago that finally gets onto and it doesn't always get into the mainstream, the metrics that I'm seeing are so glaring, like the trends that are happening right now of where we head monetarily. Like, that's the story, because that's how they're going to the trajectory of everything they're trying to build is through that system. It's going to be through stable coins. It's going to be the reset of currency. Even Elon Musk has been talking, he was being interviewed a couple of days ago about Tesla stock, about how smart money's in Tesla stock. But I just remember him 3 or 4 weeks ago saying, basically, we're just going to get everybody high, universal basic income.
We're
so
just going to get everybody high. Let's just leave it at that. That's
right.
420, that's.
Well, you might need it after you figure out nothing you have is worth anything anymore. I mean, it's that's so the point I wanted to make is you can't have both worlds. You can't have a world where stocks are truly valued at 400 times earnings and universal basic income. Like, those two things don't go together. Like, there's either an economy that works and people have upward mobility, or you have socialism. I mean, you have a totalitarian socialist state. So those two things don't go together. There's just a lot of duality happening at the same time. That's why I stay away from all of that. I try to I'll look at some headlines, but I'm looking and focusing on the intel for what's being built, and
that's right.
It's a lot of different things are being built right now, not just data centers.
Well, that's why when you look at Kitco, for example, I mean, you go to Kitco and they have the articles up and they keep them up for, several days. You just see the headlines listed there. and you'll see, because Trump said something about a memorandum of understanding, now the stock market has jumped up, and this has happened to gold, and this and that, and then the very next article or so, you'll see flipping back the other way. And it's just all this noise that Trump is creating. But you have to look at the long-term trends. And it was kind of an interesting thing that also came out. I mentioned yesterday that I think it was Bank of America, an analyst that was there, he noticed something with the stock market. He said, this is exactly what happened just before the dot-com bust. He said, just before the dot-com bust, you had only 20 stocks that went up. The rest of them were going down. And he said, same thing just happened. And it's an even narrower point that we've got right now in terms of creating essentially a pin for the bubble. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. You talk about how it's a casino, and absolutely that is true. But it's the longer-term trends, and it is the longer-term plans to have a completely controlled society that we should be concerned about. And that is coming to us through this digital world that's there. But of course, Trump's got, not Trump, but Musk has got his big IPO coming up for SpaceX, I think sometime next week. I had an interview yesterday, we're going to play tomorrow, with a guy who is, he's from Germany, and his name was Rainer Zeidelman, and he's got a book about space entrepreneurism and capitalism, and he talks a lot about Mars, and we talked about that. I said, how do you monetize? He wants to colonize Mars. How did that work out for the Virginia companies that came together to fund the people settling Virginia and in Massachusetts? If I remember correctly, those companies went bankrupt. It was a good thing for the settlers who went there. Not that I would think it'd be a good thing for a one-way trip to Mars. You ain't getting back from that once you go there. So, and it doesn't have the kind of beauty that Virgin America did when the settlers came here. But this whole thing of SpaceX and this big pump and dump that is coming in, it's going to be drawing money out of other stocks that are there. I actually saw an article. Somebody said, "What's it going to do to your 401k?" When everybody starts pulling money out of these other stocks and starts putting it into Tesla at an inflated rate. So we don't know what's going to happen with that, but it's like everything else. It really is a casino. It is a gambling casino.
It's like, what's the difference between that new stock and a meme coin? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not based off of anything or functionality. Not really. It's based off of perceived value.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the Mars colony. Well, hopefully it won't be. But what was it? Roanoke, the actual first colony that they came back, and it was just Croatan carved in a tree. Remember that?
That's right. The lost colony. They still have a play about that on the Outer Banks of North Carolina every year.
Yeah, North Carolina.
Yeah.
No, the fakeness that's in the system and in the bubble. AI is not really a bubble. It's a long-term trend, and it will infiltrate everything. I mean, AI
the same thing was true of the internet as well, but it got ahead of expectations. Everybody pours, and everybody can see the long-term implications of it, and they pour their money in, and then they don't have the patience to wait it out, because that's what we see with the stock market all the time. It's like, oh, what was the news today? Okay, they trade the news today. They don't trade long-term trends.
Yeah, and I think what will happen first, there's just going to be a reckoning. And there'll probably still be fallout from mistakes that were made 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
That will be the culmination of the end of the Bretton Woods II system that Nixon put us on after we went off the gold standard. The dollar reset as the world's reserve currency. All of these things are going to be happening pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's why I think if you look at the metrics and what's being built to use physical gold or
Mm-hmm.
physical silver for the means of currency exchange or contracts, really pay attention to that. That's the future system that's being built for what happens after.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a continual up and to the right arc for wealth in the world, and especially not in the United States. It's going to be a great reset. They've
Mm-hmm.
told you this a long time. They're going to reset the system, and what will come after will be based on some semblance of sound money, David, in my opinion, because of all of the failures previously. And a lot of these countries will remonetize their currency to gold. I don't know what the United States is going to do. As a matter of fact, we're talking again about auditing Fort Knox, which is the last time we did it was under Eisenhower. Nobody's seen it since, so I don't know if there. I don't know that there's any gold there, or half the gold. I don't know what's been promised or what's been, IOUs like Dumb and Dumber. I don't know if it's something like that, but we're definitely as the world's reserve currency. We have a real problem right now. I think the alarm bells should be going off, especially with what's happening with the price of energy and what's being converted away from that. I mean, the dollar usage is waning, and that's going to be a real issue for the power structure.
Well, they tell us over and over again what their plans are, and then when we pick it up and we start talking about it, it's a bunch of conspiracy theories. You can't believe this, and then they use the fact that we report on it, on what they have said, to basically give themselves cover and say, don't worry about it. It's not really happening. So I got a couple of questions here for you, some comments. As a matter of fact, you were talking about Nero playing fiddle, and Lance said Trump doesn't know how to play the fiddle. That's why he's hosting an MMA match instead. It's more of his style. I got a comment here from Guard Goldsmith. He says, I'm curious about gold and silver shipments to private brokers and dealers in the BRICS and some of the African nations that are orienting towards Russia now. What are your comments about that, Tony?
I don't know much about that. I have seen some intel about private buying, because we don't mention that enough. I mean, the multinationals are buying at a speed and a clip pretty much just like the central banks. It's a lot more hidden. It's not as much transparency because there's no government official designation for a lot of these multinationals, but they're absolutely doing that. Guard's right about that. I mean, and they're aligning, and he's correct. The future is not the Western dollar system. It's just not. It's not because of many factors, but especially the weaponization of the dollar. I mean, when you've got Trump in there at the beginning of 25 saying that if you don't use the dollar, you're going to get 100% tariff on your country, like that's never happened before. It's so unprecedented. It's not just about sanctions. It's not even just about entry in the United States. It's 100% tariff on all your products if you don't trade in dollars. Well, no one's really going to observe that.
No.
And by threat, and that doesn't bode well. So you're seeing there's a quiet exodus from the dollar system and new systems, and so whatever BRICS is building, and I think more of what BRICS has done is about using technology for cross-border payment systems, than unifying one currency. I don't think that's really what's going to happen, David. And we've been talking about this for years. I really do think that at the end of the day, gold will be used. Again, they'll have technology and maybe blockchain to solidify contracts and to back up whatever currency's there, but it'll be transparent in real time. It won't be like, the Fort Knox system with the United States where supposedly we have, 8,000 tons or whatever it is.
I think BRICS is really looking more like a confederacy than trying to create some kind of a union with one country in charge. That may evolve into that with China in charge, but right now they're trying to create this multilateral thing, and I think you're right. I think it is about the exchange of the money that is there. I've got another question for you. Hatchcar 612 asks, has the U.S. Mint halted production of Silver Eagles?
Not to my knowledge. I have not. I usually would know that. They do occasionally halt for a minute and then catch up on supply, especially when there's a large demand. But I've gotten no. I do not know. I'll look into that and find out for next show. I haven't heard anything. I usually will get a notice from some of the mints that I do business with, but I haven't seen that.
Oh, that's interesting. Anything else you want to tell us about what's going on at Wise Wolf? And again, just mention to people, Wolfpack is a way that you can gradually accumulate gold and silver. You can determine what amount you want to do each month, and even if it's a small purchase, Tony will work with you to set up that small recurring purchase. So it's a great way to save money. You can save money in a currency in something that is not going to be losing value constantly, like the U.S. dollar. So what else is going on at Wise Wolf, Tony?
Oh, well, this week I had to go back to Texas, then I'm up in Branson again, just delivering product, making sure we get these packages out there. We've got a lot of great stuff going into Wolfpack right now. I have done my best to find interesting pieces of silver and other things that aren't in traditional, bullion subscriptions that I had a customer recently that took his stuff to a coin dealer because he wanted to verify. I said, well, I welcome that, because a lot of the coins that you get are going to be worth more than the silver price. We just go through so much bulk, with stuff. We just put even collectibles in there. So that's something I worked on this week, is bringing a load of stuff that we bought in Texas up here to Branson to sift through and to sort out. So that's something we're working on. We also got, for Wolfpack, you can become an affiliate. It takes like 2 or 3 minutes to sign up if you're interested in making a little extra money. You can go to davidknight.gold. You can go to Wolfpack and sign up as an affiliate, or you can just send us an email. We'll send you a link. But that's the one way you can make a little extra cash, by just sharing the link out with, it'll be your link. You can see what the sales are. We're really concentrating on that, David. I'm putting more of my infrastructure into the subscription program because I feel like everyday Americans and everyday people can still buy it. The larger purchases are not as frequent as they used to be. A lot of people are just sitting on the sidelines. It's confusing out there. I mean, it's one of the
thing
weirdest.
I like about the small levels of Wolfpack are that you get things like the goldbacks and stuff like that, which I think is really cool. I think that's such a useful thing. I mean, especially when it comes to the point that we actually need to use it. If you got something that's in a smaller denomination, which is what happens when you sign up for the lower levels of Wolfpack, now you've got something that's not like $1 million gold bar or something,
Yeah, in 5 years, Goldback will be so ubiquitous you won't recognize it. I've talked to some of the leadership of Goldback. They've actually come to visit me. I popped up on their radar because I was selling so many Goldbacks and put them through Wolfpack. Like, who is this guy? How are you moving this many Goldbacks? And they came and met with me, and I told them what I do. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we want to integrate you into our system. And they told me about how they use Goldbacks and how it's creeping into like everyday, even small towns and markets where people are just trading Goldbacks between each other. They were showing me these metrics. So there's a lot happening. Even, new states are coming online. Texas will be soon. We'll have an official Texas Goldback. There's many, many other states, and they're going to be used as currency. There will be. And the cool thing about Goldback is it's not, it's obviously it's a fraction of gold. So you got 24 karat gold in the note itself. So you've got meltable value, but there's a fixed Goldback exchange rate. You can actually just download the app. And so when you're doing it, it stays in a fixed system. And for as long as they can hold it, then they'll reset it again. So right now it's a fixed system. So whether you've got, a half denomination or a 5, like you just calculate what one Goldback is. So when one Goldback's listed, like I think it's $8 right now, you take the Goldback and then you just multiply it or divide it by, and it stays fixed. It's really cool. I think
that's great. Having that app, I didn't know about that app for the Goldbacks. That's really important.
Yeah. Goldback will be, in 5 years, there will be so much more ubiquitous. They're building an infrastructure for Goldback currency exchange. Really cool. And we obviously we take Goldbacks at both my locations, or if you want to deal with us in Goldbacks, you can. It's a really neat system.
That's great. Well, you've got a program immediately following this one as well, right? On Rumble as well as on X. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Immediately following this one, yes.
Immediately following, we'll be live. I'll see if I can cook up a show here in the next 5 minutes or so.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's always great having you on, and I really do appreciate your support. One of our longest-term supporters, Tony Arterburn at Wise Wolf, and of course, you can get there through davidknight.gold as well. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Hear news now at apsradionews.com or get the APS Radio app and never miss another story.
Well, when I saw this, I thought this was artificial intelligence. I thought it was AI. This picture of a bull that looks like Donald Trump. It looks like his hair anyway. His hair is there in a comb over or a toupee, whatever it is, for the real thing for the Donald Trump. And this is actually a rare albino buffalo. It became a sensation when a farmer noticed that his blonde tuft of hair resembled the hair of Trump. Large numbers of people started showing up at his farm outside Dhaka to see him for themselves. And this is in Bangladesh. And the animal was, they said, just as Trump has a distinctive personality and lifestyle, so does this bull. Yeah, Trump is full of bull, isn't he? The buffalo is going viral, now living a similar kind of life, enjoying a lot of attention and special treatment, even though he's not producing anything except a lot of BS. And they sold the bull for their annual sacrifice rituals and stuff. And oddly enough, it was spared from the slaughter by Wilbur Ross and the Rothschilds. No, that was Donald Trump actually himself. But we don't really know what is going to happen with this animal. It got sent to a zoo, which is kind of uncanny because it's what the real Trump said included a sign at the zoo that says Donald Trump. That sign has now been removed. They thought that it was not appropriate, but it actually is what the real Donald Trump does, isn't it? Doesn't he always put up a sign with his name on it? So they said, since before, I don't know what you call this Muslim, how you pronounce this, EID, Eid or something. Anyway, that's their big Muslim festival. Said, I've been seeing posts on Facebook saying that Donald Trump would be sacrificed. I heard that instead of being sacrificed, though, he'd been placed in a zoo. It looked like somebody was out to assassinate him, but that didn't happen either. So again, is this the real future of the real Trump? Is it jail and a zoo, or is it slaughter? We don't know, but we do know that after that there will be a judgment at some point in time.
They're saying they're going to sacrifice him. They just clipped his ear.
That's right, he clipped his ear. Yeah, he just got a dog tag in his ear. But unlike the real, that's where the similarity ends. There is no notch in the real Donald Trump's ear. Well, the World Cup is going to be patrolled by some of these security robo-dogs that are really creepy, created by Boston Dynamics. But of course, everybody is making these things now. This is what it looks like. Got very fluid motion, by the way. Look at this. It comes up and is it playing with me or is it scanning me? Tilts its head from one side to the other. So is it doing facial recognition, or what is this thing up to, right? And what are they up to? Of course, Boston Dynamics has been bought by Hyundai, and so it is no longer an American corporation, but they are at the forefront of all the robotics. They have very, very fluid movement. This is now going to be part of the security for the World Cup. So a lot of people, some people said, well, there are rumors that they were going to use facial scanning technology, because it seems like that. You know, you got something comes up to you with a camera on it, and it starts paying a great deal of attention to you. That's what you would think. But
from the government that brought you dancing nurses comes the new dancing mascot for the next wave of tyranny.
That's right. Yeah, that's the way to look at it. Think of this thing like the dancing nurses that you saw during COVID. Well, you even had J.D. Vance say that tell the people that are coming for the World Cup, he said, enjoy it, but then you need to go home or you'll have to talk to Kristi Noem. Well, they could use Kristi Noem. This is a dog that should be shot, and she's famous about shooting dogs. So she should get her gun and come after some of these dogs. Anyway, they said that using it for facial scanning is just a rumor at this point. They said they're going to use it to assist security personnel with investigating things like suspicious packages or potentially hazardous materials. So kind of vague as to how they're going to use it, but they were bragging about the fact, Hyundai was, that it was the first and only official partner to provide robotics for the tournament. Many people compared it to the famous Black Mirror episode called Metalhead, which was derived, basically, it copied Boston Dynamics, so here we go, full circle back around. That was an episode where a woman is relentlessly hunted by one of these autonomous killer robot dogs. But, they make it dance while it does techno-authoritarian surveillance.
Well, there's a difference. The one from Black Mirror didn't dance.
Yeah, but see, this is the whole point of all this stuff, isn't it? Right? The whole point of this is to move the Overton window and to get you accustomed to these things. So they put them out there as a novel curiosity, and it's got those nice little moves where it comes up and has moves like a real dog, tilting its head from one side to the other like it's trying to understand you.
It's
but
not
it
going
is
to be doing anything nefarious this time.
That's right. It's about entertaining tyranny. That's exactly what Trump is about, too. He's about entertaining you while he puts in place all the systems of tyranny. As a matter of fact, Reason Magazine says, well, do you trust government to control AI? Their subtitle says, Trump wants to give it a little more control. Bernie Sanders wants to give it a lot. Well, let's just understand, I don't really agree with that assessment. I don't think Trump wants to control AI. I think he wants to remove control. I think he wants to give it total immunity. And quite frankly, so does Reason. They're concerned about the fact that Bernie Sanders wants to enact some control, especially about the fact that Bernie Sanders wants to have government ownership of these companies, which, again, that raises all kinds of red flags with Reason and a lot of libertarians. And it should, because what that does is that destroys the companies.
I mean, it's really just two sides of the same coin. You've got Bernie Sanders pushing government-controlled version, and Trump is pushing the public-private partnership version.
That's right. He wants his cut. Yeah, he wants a cut on all this stuff. Bernie will get his money. I mean, he's got his multi-million-dollar mansions, several of them.
And both of them are pushing for big AIs while trying to shut down anything that might be available to the little guy. Something
That's right.
that might democratize this.
And that's the real key issue. It has to be like it is with guns. And but what Trump wants to do, he wants to give it immunity, just like he's done with he and others have done for the longest time since 1986 with the vaccine companies, like Pfizer, like he did with the COVID thing. And he also wants to give it immunity like he just did with glyphosate for Bayer. Bernie Sanders wants government in control, says Reason. Well, government is in control, and government will be in control. This is all being created for the use and abuse by government. Fusing government priorities with private sector priorities is the whole point of Sanders' new proposal, which would give the public a 50% ownership stake in the largest AI companies in America. And as we were just saying, Lance and I, that's the difference. Trump wants a 50% stake in it. He doesn't want the public to have it, but he's going to give them carte blanche to do whatever they want. And when I look at this, Reason just doesn't get that kind of fascism. They don't get that kind of government corporate partnership. They think strictly in terms of monetary issues. Reason never understood, and this includes people who wrote editorials from them like John Stossel. They never understood the government partnership with social media companies to shut down narratives. I remember seeing John Stossel write these op-ed pieces and saying, well, they just censored me for what I had to say, and as much as I hate that, I have to support their private property rights to shut me down on this thing. It's like, man, you don't really understand what's behind this? You don't see the hidden hand of government? They're using the velvet glove of private ownership to get many libertarians and conservatives to agree to this. And, of course, they'll also agree to it, the conservatives will agree to it, because of the partisan club issues that are there. But, again, they never really understand this public-private partnership of tyranny. Which then brings us to something else. Quantum computing, is it hype or is it the real deal? Ask an article on Zero Hedge. They say, well, the word quantum is defined as an amount with a Latin root meaning how much. In physics, a quantum is the smallest discrete unit of any physical property. The adjective form is, as in quantum leap, describes a sudden, significant, fundamental change. It is also the perfect adjective for what is coming next in technological innovation, quantum computing. And, of course, people are very concerned that once they have this massive quantum leap in the capability and speed of computers that will come from quantum computing, that it's going to make things like passwords and other things like that obsolete. So, but this is something that is still on its way. And so, that was the thing that stopped me right there was I thought, yeah, I've talked about this. I remember back in 2020 when Steve Pieczenik did his quantum computing sting and the fact that he said we've got these blockchain watermark nonsense and all the rest of this stuff. He was selling that as already being in place. And I said, no, they don't have quantum computing in place where they can use it that way. And it doesn't make any sense that you would do a blockchain watermark on the ballots. And of course, the ballots are not being printed by the federal government. Every state prints its own ballot. And every part of this was a lie. And so I stopped reading that article and I thought, I wonder if I know that the search engines like Google have memory hold pretty much everything that was happening 6 years ago around this kind of stuff. I know they pretty much memory hold everything that I did. So I pulled it up and I asked Grok, I said, so what do you know about Steve Pieczenik's reporting of an alleged election sting back in 2020? I thought that was kind of interesting. It says, well, Steve Pieczenik, a former State Department official, appeared on Alex Jones's InfoWars in late 2020, early 2021, promoting claims that the 2020 election involved a quote-unquote sting operation or a trap by Trump and allies to catch election fraud or deep state actors. This is part of a broader, unproven theories about rigged elections, military involvement, and the Kraken, often linked to Sidney Powell's lawsuits. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Do you know anything about what happened with David Knight at InfoWars? I asked it about the sting. And it says, yeah, David Knight, then a host on InfoWars with his own show, was highly skeptical of the sting operation, claimed that was pushed by Steve Pieczenik in late 2020. Shortly after Pieczenik appeared on Owen Schroyer's War Room, claiming the 2020 election was a deliberate, Trump-orchestrated, sophisticated sting with watermarked ballots, National Guard involvement. He said 20,000 National Guard have been deployed already and were already arresting people. Impending arrest, etc. Knight pushed back strongly. He labeled Pieczenik a CIA shill who appears on shows to set disinformation honeypots or traps for people like Schroyer. Knight essentially called the claim fabricated lies and disinformation, and he warned viewers against trusting them. I thought this is kind of interesting. So far, I've not been memory hold, and I thought it was amazing that it remembered this in that kind of detail. But it made me think about it when we went back to quantum computing, because that really is something that is starting to come out, but it was way ahead of its time and not something that was possible at that point in time. And they point out in the Zero Hedge article that said, yeah, we've seen a lot of headlines lately, things like this. Google unveils a mind-boggling Willow chip solving 10 septillion year problem in just minutes. Does this sound familiar, Lance? Does it sound like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Deep Thought? Except they didn't have a fast enough computer. They had to set this thing up and come back centuries and centuries later. They're talking about 10 septillion years. When we talk about trillion and you go to quadrillion and quintillion, and you're talking about septillion, that's 7. I don't know how many zeros you got behind that, but it is absolutely mind-boggling. And I don't believe that that's true either, quite frankly. There's been a lot of questions about their pronouncements about their Willow chipset. Promising headlines loaded with industry jargon, and that's exactly it. A lot of jargon about this stuff that really doesn't pan out in many cases. But we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the jargon that's been flying back and forth over Pride Month and the GOP. The GOP has now completely embraced Pride Month, and they come after anybody within their group that pushes back against Pride Month. It truly is amazing. We're going to talk about that when we come back.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go. Elvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
And the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
Welcome back, and we were just talking about the four-legged robots, but there's another one that is running for Senate in Texas, James Tallarico. It was really kind of funny. This is something that was noticed by a podcaster, and he took a couple of speeches that were done by Tallarico, and this guy is so rehearsed that not only does he say the same thing over and over again, but he says it with the same speed. He says it with the same cadence and inflection. Listen to this.
I've gone to every corner of Texas over the course of this campaign, from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, and everywhere in between. And I can't tell you the number of people who come up to me at the end of these events and whisper, "I'm not a Democrat," like they're in the witness protection program.
Yeah, well, I'm not on board with what this guy has to say about anything, whether he's talking about politics, but especially when he's talking about religion.
There are so many pathways to the sacred.
No, they're not.
The Islamic mystic Rumi said, "Every religion has love, but love has no religion." God is so much bigger than our human categories. God is not a Presbyterian. God is not a Christian.
Oh, okay.
God is not a noun at all. God is a verb. God is not a being. God is being itself.
God is not a being.
God is love. And that's why Jesus is against anything that gets in the way of that love between neighbors, including religion.
This is a guy who is constantly contradicting the Jesus that he says he follows, right? Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." This guy denies that there is one way to God. He denies that God is a person. And of course, he denies that the Bible is God's word, right? Because God has, if you believe it's God's word, the Bible is God's word, well, God has preferred pronouns, and he prefers to ignore those. And so it is kind of interesting. I have to ask, what God does he serve? He starts out by quoting an Islamic philosopher, and then he gets very philosophical with his pagan philosophy, but he does not follow the God of the Bible in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, somebody noticed that not only is this guy robotically repeating these things over and over again, but put that up, Lance. I don't know where that is, that clip that of all these guys, that why they all look alike. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's on the second page, last video.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. I still don't see it on the second page. Well, anyway, somebody put up a video. If you can find it, we'll throw it up there. But somebody put up a video and said, why do all these guys look alike? And they had a picture of James Tallarico. They had Beto O'Rourke. And it truly is amazing that these guys really do look like they're clones and robots, don't they? But I wanted to play for you what is actually going on at the so-called church that he attends as well. Because the guy that he said is the biggest influence on his life is the guy who is the pastor at the church that he attends. And of course, he's somebody who, he does preach at this church, and he goes to a Presbyterian seminary. This guy that he says is his pastor is Jim Rigby, a pastor who rarely uses the word God. And there's a reason for that, I guess. He says the key to understanding the Senate candidate is trying to pull off something unusual in Texas. This is an op-ed piece from the New York Times saying, are Texans really ready for Tallarico's kind of Christianity? Well, it's not Christianity at all. These people are deceivers. They're heretics. They are a create your own God club. And I just have to say, when people like this, and we've seen this many, many times, we've seen it in Presbyterian churches and United Church of Christ and a lot of Lutheran churches, they go out and they have these church services where they worship abortion or they worship the rainbow flag or whatever. And it's like, if that's what you guys are about, why do you insist on calling yourself Christians? Why do you insist on calling yourself a church? If you got a club like that, it's based around something else, just come up with an honest name instead of trying to deceive people like this. And don't take Christ's name in vain. There's a specific commandment about that. I think that's a lot more than just using his name as a swear word, which the people who run Hollywood have tried their best to make ubiquitous. On a recent Sunday morning in St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Austin, Jim Rigby asked his congregation to share what came to mind when he mentioned the Apostle Paul. And New York Times points out that for those people who don't know, the Apostle Paul is a major writer of the New Testament. He wrote 13 books of the New Testament, or letters that he wrote to churches to correct errors like this church has. As a matter of fact, there's only 27 different books in the New Testament, so you could say that he wrote half of them, especially because one of them is a very short letter, a very short one from Jude. Of course, he also had a very short letter that he wrote about freeing a slave. But basically, it's about half of the New Testament was given to us through the Apostle Paul. That's the way Christians understand that. That's not the way the New York Times and Rigby and the Presbyterian Church there in Austin recognize it. So he asked people, he said, so what do you think about Paul? And so they replied, shouted out, people shouted out, villain. Another one said, homophobic. And I don't think actually he feared homosexuals. I think that whole thing about homophobic is a misnomer. But, you know, it was Paul who wrote to the people in Thessalonica. He said to the Thessalonians, he said, you accepted us and what we told you, not as word of man, but as from God, as it is in truth, the word of God, which effectively works in you who believe. So that would not be this church, right? It doesn't effectively work in those who are not believers. And these people are not believers in the Word of God either. They look at what Paul wrote, they just treat it as the word of a man, not as the Word of God. And I have to say, if it's the word of man, why even bother getting all dressed up and going to this church here? They have rejected Paul. They have rejected the fact that the Bible is God's word. They have rejected God's preferred pronouns because they reject the fact that it is God's word. And so another person continues on and says, talking about Paul, again, they called him villainous, homophobic. Another person says, a jerk. And so New York Times says, well, Paul encouraged wives to submit to their husbands, told them to be quiet in church, condemning same-sex behavior as sinful. Well, you know, they always want to talk about submission, but there were two sides to this. You know, Paul told husbands to love and honor their wives and to protect them. They always leave out that part. In a sermon that also cited the Bhagavad Gita, whatever that is, and Buddha, he nudged his congregation to reconsider the apostle, one of the most important in the early Christian church. I know you hate what he had to say. I know you reject everything that's said in the Bible, but think about Paul as a philosopher. He said Aristotle and Plato were creeps too. If we look at him in terms of modern times, he says, but do you want to learn from our ancestors or not? Well, again, do you want to learn from God or not? Do you believe it's God's word or not? And really, they're not your ancestors if you don't believe this. As Jesus said, he said, you say Abraham is your father is the devil if you don't believe what I have to say. He was pretty strict about that. Mr. Rigby has led the St. Andrews since the 1980s and is a well-known activist locally. He's suddenly become a key to understanding Mr. Tallarico, a candidate who aims to be the first Democrat to win statewide office in Texas in a generation. In an interview with the New York Times, Mr. Tallarico described Rigby And St. Andrews, along with his grandfather, who was a pastor of several Baptist churches in South Texas in the late 1960s, as, quote, the biggest influences on me as a Christian, as a human being. I guess that's why he sees Paul and the letters that he wrote as being homophobic, villainous, and something of a jerk. He said, he's my pastor in every sense of the word. Not that we agree on everything, but it seems that they do agree that they can ignore the Bible and should ignore it. As a matter of fact, they're not the only ones, of course, who are like this. This is another church that is very much like it. This one is not Presbyterian, but it is a Lutheran church. And in this particular one, you've got somebody who is talking about God as strange, fabulous, and fluid.
Please rise as you're able. Strange one, fabulous one, fluid and ever becoming one.
Becoming one what? Yeah, this is their prayer.
As close to us as our own breath, and yet your essence transcends all that we can imagine. You are mother, father, parent. You are drag queen and trans man and gender fluid, incapable of limiting your vast expressions of beauty. We recognize our flesh in all it forms is made holy in you. Blessed are our bodies. Blessed
Well, you get the idea. I don't think I want to hear any more of this. I'd be walking out at this point, long before that, as a matter of fact. But, you know, that is not as deceptive to most Bible-believing Christians as the Zionism of people like Hagee out of Austin, San Antonio.
Satanism and witchcraft. There's a revival of witchcraft sweeping this nation right now. We are a nation of drive-by shooting, sex trafficking, child abuse, anti-Semitism, and Jew hatred flows in this country, especially out of our universities.
So you see, he identifies the things that conservatives are not going to like about this. And, oh, yeah, so this guy is more aligned with what the Bible says about some of these other issues. And yet what he does is he very subtly works in the worship of Israel. They are more dangerous, I think, because they are more subtle in their deception. You know, what did the Bible say about Satan? He was the most subtle of them all, right, in the Garden of Eden. Well, when we look at this kind of subtle undermining that is happening in our society, here's a good example of this. We have, of course, begun Pride Month. June is Pride Month, where everybody comes out of their closets and waves their rainbow flags. And so you had a conservative Tennessee congressman, Andy Ogles, who on X, he had a staffer who tweeted out a message. He said it was his staffer, who tweeted out a message saying, homosexuality has no place in America. He was immediately attacked by everybody, including people like Ted Cruz and Mike Johnson, as being somebody who hates. Now, the message was not really very clear. It should have had the context. Again, the understood context is in the context of Pride Month having started. But this person didn't really say that. He didn't say that celebrating sin has no place in America. Instead, he said homosexuality has no place in America. And so there's a big pushback, and they've had Andy Ogles on with Fox News to try to defend himself. On Tuesday, one day after Pride Month began, his account said homosexuality has no place in America, and a now deleted X post was immediately ripped apart for it by his colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Hours later, Ogles stopped short of an apology and instead blamed a member of the communications team for the quote-unquote hurtful message. He said, earlier today, my phone began going crazy because of a post made by a member of my comms team. The post was stupid, hurtful, and a complete distraction from my America First focus. The employee has been reprimanded. How dare you push back against the idea that we should be proud of our rebellion to God? You know, when we talk about what America is about, one of the things, and I talk about this every year when we get to Thanksgiving, we were for the longest time, and I'm not aware if anybody else has now enacted a holiday to set aside and to thank God for the blessings that we've got. But in reality, what America should be about is about thanking God for the blessings that we enjoy, rather than celebrating rebellion to his face, which is what Pride Month is. It is a celebration of pride, which God hates, by the way. God despises pride. Throughout the Bible, you can't miss the fact that God despises pride, but that's just pride in general. That's not even somebody who is proud of their sin. I mean, they could be proud of the fact they got a lot of military, as David was judged by God for very harshly for that. He went out and he counted how big his military was, and God pushed back against that very harshly. But this is not even about something like this. This is about being very proud of your sin. And so, again, when we look at this, this is basically hedonistic rebellion to God. And yet, look at how the GOP has closed ranks to condemn this. Ogles faced fierce criticism, including from members of his own party. Mike Lawler, who is a New York state congressman, said homosexuality exists in America. In fact, Andy, you have family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and constituents who are gay and lesbian. It doesn't make them less or somehow unworthy of being an American. What an absolutely idiotic statement to make. Well, Lawler is absolutely idiotic. This is the same type of thing where we get punished if we don't celebrate their celebration of their rebellion to God. You understand how that works, right? We must celebrate that. And if we don't, the left has always told us that we are hateful. Now you've got Republicans telling you that. And it's not just a Republican congressman from New York. It's also Ted Cruz. It's also Mike Johnson who are saying that. And so again, let us be thankful to God, but let us not be proud of our rebellion to him. That's his pronoun. That's his correct pronoun. And again, why would we celebrate this? Do they want to? Do they want their someone like George Santos as their poster child? Because George Santos also jumped into this. The guy who is next to Trump, the biggest liar in politics, George Santos. Well, he's openly gay. He pushed back on this, as the New York Times points out, this homophobic post. Well, I never thought I'd hear a person I consider a friend say there's no place for me in this country simply because of who I choose to love, he said. Well, again, I have to say then, why am I punished? Why am I labeled as hateful? Why am I censored? Why am I shadow banned and all the rest of this stuff if I choose to love God and not to love your rebellion to God? That's what I want to know. He says, I've always voted and advocated for conservative principles. What conservative principles? Truth? What is that about? This guy wouldn't know the truth if it hit him over the head. And so Ted Cruz was confused by all this, says this article. And of course, Ted Cruz is confused about the Old Testament and Abraham's role and all that as well. Cruz replied that for all of recorded history, homosexuals have been part of humanity. Well, here's the thing. Ted Cruz wants to pick and choose what he follows in the Bible. And if he wants to go all Hebrew and Judaizer on us, you might want to go back and look at the fact that God strongly condemned homosexuality. He had people stoned for that. Now, we don't stone people as Christians because of Christ, which when he talks about Zionism, he completely misses how Christ came to change all of this. So now Christ says, let him who's without sin cast the first stone. And Christ is the one who came to die for all of our sins. And we're talking about not just homosexuality or rebellion to God. Every one of our sins is a rebellion to God. We may not celebrate all of them with parades and special months, but they're all rebellion to God. And that's what people should be pushing on, the fact that of what Christ has done and the grace that he brings for all of this, rather than saying, how dare you condemn my behavior? Cruz said, I've got to say that I'm a libertarian by nature. He is a phony libertarian, if ever there was one, just like he is a phony conservative, and he offers you phony Christian theology as well. And so the question is, so should you vote against Tallarico, who wants you to think that God is transgender, that God is fluid? that Paul is a homophobic villain and vile? Or should you support Ken Paxton, who is a philandering felon? He is he's had to make restitution for securities fraud. Ken Paxton, his opponent, has been impeached. He has been bought by donors just like Trump. And he has also cheated on his wife and then thrown her away, divorced her. He is nearly as corrupt as Trump. Just give him time and a higher office, and you can have another little Trumpoid out there called Ken Paxton. So I'm not saying that Ken Paxton is the alternative either. I'm just saying this is the sad state of affairs that we find ourselves in America, and I see it as a judgment from God because we have embraced and celebrated sinful practices like we do this month. Sesame Street, meanwhile, got some backlash from not nearly as much. It's kind of interesting to see how many articles were written about the fact that somebody in Andy Ogl's staff said that push back against Pride Month, but people are not pushing back about the fact that Sesame Street is pushing Pride Month to children. I only see this on one kind of backwater Christian publication site, faithwire.com. They said Sesame Street is facing scrutiny, well, not really, not from anybody really, over a social media post commemorating the start of Pride Month. It featured an image of the characters' multicolored furs stacked in order to create a rainbow image. They wrote, "Happy Pride Month from Sesame Street. Join us in celebrating and uplifting the LGBTQIA plus members of our community." And see, that's just it. We're not just celebrating people. We are celebrating a practice. And that is the reality and the truth of this. And that's why people like Mike Johnson and Ted Cruz should not be pushing back on this. They should clarify it. They should clarify, we're not pushing back against the homosexuals, but we will not honor and celebrate that kind of rebellion to God. Texas pastor Josh Howerton said, guys, there is no universe in which it makes sense to message children about sexual desires, regardless of your worldview. Again, don't tread so carefully. So as another person said, Brillin Holland said, there is no scenario where Elmo telling kids to follow their sexual desires isn't grooming from an activist who is cosplaying as an educator. And again, we go back to 2021. During Pride Month, Sesame Street commemorated Pride Month by introducing a homosexual couple on its Family Day episode. See, they're selling this. They're selling this as acceptable, not only as acceptable, and it's not as something that you tolerate. They don't demand tolerance. They demand celebration. It makes all the difference in the world. There's a huge difference between tolerating something and saying, okay, well, I understand you're not a Christian. I understand you're not a follower of Christ. And let me tell you that there is, no matter what your relationship is with God, God has made a way to sanctify that, and so that you can have a relationship with him. And he has actually got something that is better for you. But I'm not going to tell you that you can't do this, and I'm not going to try to lock you away in prison for doing any of that. That is a tolerance that is there, mixed with the truth. But we're not to celebrate this. Sesame Street has always been a welcoming place of diversity and inclusion, unless you're somebody who wants, is a Bible believer. They don't include you. They are not sensitive to that, and they do not welcome that at all. They don't welcome the Bible. They don't welcome God. They don't welcome Bible believers. And then you have a homosexual German priest saying that the Bible should be read through queer lens. Again, he even talks about the difference. He says his concept of Bible exegesis includes things like who is and has been excluded, who is and has been marginalized. How can the text be understood from a queer perspective? Again, that is not what they call exegesis. Exegesis is trying to read the true meaning of the text out of the text. This is the opposite of that. It's what they call eisegesis, which is reading what you want into the text. We see that all the time. Again, if you go back to the typical conservative heresies of Zionism and dispensationalism, One of their advocates said, you got to read the Bible with a newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other. Well, if you do that, you're going to be reading the news into the Bible. And that's what this guy is doing. His name is Father Hose. I guess they call him Father Pantyhose, maybe. A well-known pro-LGBT activist within the Catholic Church of Germany. He wrote an essay in which he laid out what it means to read Holy Scriptures through a queer lens. And again, you start out with your perspective and don't let God change it, right? Don't have an open mind and say, what is God saying about this? And again, I guess that brings us back to, how are we to read the Bible? When I was very young, I would look at the Bible and say, well, what is God telling me to do? Kind of like the what would Jesus do type of thing. Now, that's not necessarily a really bad way to do it, but that can lead to legalism because God is not about a religion. He is about us being in relationship with him and how to reestablish that broken relationship that we have broken. And so now I want to...
about telling you what to do, but about telling you what God has done.
That's right. What has God done in Christ? And so now when I look at it, I look at it from the standpoint, and we see things that we're doing, I look at it and say, well, what is it that I'm doing, if I want to focus on my actions, what is it that I'm doing that is quenching that relationship that God wants with me, that he has made possible through Christ and through no other way? So what is it that I'm doing that's getting in the way of that? I think that's an important way to look at this. And yet, as I said before, Mike Johnson jumped on this post from a staff member at Ogles. I think he said, we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I see that, especially when I see it from Mike Johnson, I think about there was a movie, I think it was back in the 90s, and it was called Must Love Dogs. And it was about somebody trying to, find somebody to date and talking about, what their preferences were and the person they wanted to date. And there was a line in that, and somebody was kind of creeped out about how attached somebody was to their dog. And they said, well, you need to love dogs, but don't love your dog, like as in bestiality. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Mike Johnson is confusing all of this stuff. He says, he emphasized people should be treated with dignity regardless of their beliefs or their lifestyle. Well, that's absolutely true. And that absolutely is Christian. And yet, we don't see that from the other side, do we, Mike? We also see that we are not loved, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of our lifestyle. We are demonized and hated. They call us cisgender. They call us breeders and all the rest of the stuff if we speak against these practices. And so he said, he believes the Bible is unequivocal. He said, we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. Everybody. Well, that's right. But of course, as I kind of alluded to in that joke, love your dog, but don't love your dog. There are 4 different Greek words for love, and he is confusing and conflating 2 of these. Because we have things like brotherly love, phileo, which is where the city of brotherly love took its name, Philadelphia, right? And so that's the kind of, brotherly love that you would have with somebody. And then, of course, there is eros, sexual love. And these things are very different things, even though we only have one English word for all of that. I just have to ask, how far are Cruz and Johnson from hating Paul and Romans in the same way that Tallarico's church does? And you see the slippery slope and how the so-called conservatives and the GOP, which is excused for all of Trump's term, they have excused his adultery. They've excused his rape. They have excused his pedophilia. They have covered for that SOB. So they're kind of going down that whole road for a very long time. And they're going to continue down that road until you're going to start seeing people like Ted Cruz and Mike Johnson pouring hate on the Bible and hate on the Apostle Paul while they love Israel. No matter what Israel does, Israel can go out and murder civilians and no problem at all. But don't you dare say anything against Pride Month. Well, You had, as part of this encyclical from the Pope, he was talking about AI, and he had some useful things to say about it. But he also was called out by some conservative Catholics, like those at LifeSite News. They said, why is the Pope Leo, why is he apologizing for slavery? And they pointed out, it's because, the church ended slavery. We shouldn't be apologizing for this. We should not be taking responsibility for this as something that was created by the church. It was not created by the church. It was ended by the church. It was ended by people like William Wilberforce. And let me tell you, that is the way that Christianity needs to manifest itself in politics, and the way that William Wilberforce did it. Not in the ways that are being done by Tallarico and these Zionists like Pete Hegseth twisting and Ted Cruz twisting scripture, replacing Christ with a political foreign government. That is not Christian nationalism. That is nothing other than heresy. Thank you for joining us. And by the way, before we stop, Lance, hang on before you kick it off here. Tomorrow we got a couple of really interesting interviews. I alluded to one of them earlier in the program when I was talking to Tony. I've got a guy who has written a book about capitalism and entrepreneurship in space, and he talks quite a bit about Elon Musk and his plans for colonization, and also what he's been able to accomplish with SpaceX. It gets released on June the 9th, 3 days before the IPO for SpaceX. So you might want to at least listen to the interview if you don't get his book and read it. It's an interesting book. And so we talk a lot about the different approaches being taken by both Bezos and by Musk, and why the government can't make any progress in this area like many others because it's just not equipped to have the consequences of failure cause it to improve. And so I think it's a very interesting interview. We also have, as we're looking at a lot of the case for space capitalism and entrepreneurship, really does boil down to the harvesting of minerals. And so we also have kind of a bookend interview with another guy who is looking at some EPA rules and how difficult it is for us to do anything in terms of mining on this earth. And of course, there has to be a happy medium somewhere with this stuff. And it is so far out of whack that it is another thing that is shutting down manufacturing here in America. So tomorrow we've got a couple of interesting interviews, and I have another report that I'm going to be running that will all air tomorrow. But thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a great weekend. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
You're listening to The David Knight Show. Analyzing the globalists' next move. And now, The David Knight Show. Using free speech to free minds. It's The David Knight Show. Decoding the mainstream propaganda.